Thank you very much, Janet. I have a PowerPoint presentation to accompany the content of the lecture, hence I will stand here and I'll be moving down to click every now and again. That is the front cover of my book. Barry has copies available there, and I also have some in my bag, but please see Barry first of all, and I'd be happy to sign any copies which are purchased. So the word Maya is derived from a Sanskrit root ma, meaning to measure. And Hindu teachings inform us that creation is measured out in its myriad forms by Brahman, the transcendent reality, personified by the creator god Brahma, whom we see on the illustration. And these teachings advise us that creation arises when Brahman, with a vast outbreath, sounds forth the universal note of creation, the Om. And the wisdom teachings inform us that this gives rise to the 7 rays, the 7 ultimate archetypes which activate, construct and maintain creation. The sounding of the Om initially gives rise to the first 3 major rays. Ray 1 of will and power, Ray 2 of love, wisdom, and Ray 3 of active intelligence. And from these 3 principal rays of aspect are derived the 4 minor rays of attribute, which result from various combinations of the 3 major rays. Now, the 3 major rays form the basis of all Trinitarian religious teachings, including the Hindu Trimurti. We have the first ray of will and power, relating to the god Shiva, the god of destruction and transformation. Ray 2 of love, wisdom, relating to Vishnu, the god of preservation and sustenance. And Ray 3 relating to the creator god Brahma. So the Hindus advise us that matter is measured out by 3 primary forces. I hope you can see them there. It's the white on my system, on my computer, is coming up as black, but we'll get there, don't worry. These 3 forces are referred to as the 3 gunas of Rajas, Sattva and Tamas. Now, yeah, I know you can't, I'm sorry, it's the difference between my computer program and the other one. No, they're coming up dark on the system here, I can see it, whereas they are white on my one. I'm sorry, I apologise, I'm not sure what's happened. So Rajas relates to activity, energy, movement, and has an association with Ray 3. Sattva relates to peace, goodness, happiness and balance, and it is related to Ray 2. And Tamas relates to dullness, sloth, inertia and dissolution, and has a relationship to Ray 1. And it's the natural interplay of these forces which give rise to what we refer to as Maya. And the first objective taught in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is for the individual treading the spiritual path to dispel Rajas and Tamas and to increase the presence of the Sattva guna, thereby promoting serenity and spiritual clarity. However, our spiritual essence is completely beyond the gunas. It is the ultimate goal, therefore, to transcend these, as Janet's quote so beautifully illustrated. In transcending the gunas, one can attain liberation from the wheel of rebirth, what the Hindus refer to as moksha. So the teachings of Advaita Vedanta inform us that Brahman is both transcendent of creation, yet also immanent. There is the well-known quote from the Bhagavad Gita, having pervaded the entire universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. You're probably not going to see this again. The transcendent Brahman is referred to as Nirguna Brahman, meaning without the gunas or beyond the gunas. Whereas immanent Brahman is referred to as Saguna Brahman, or with the gunas. And this is Brahman's dream of the world, or what we refer to as Maya. And as a means of illustration here, in terms of Maya, I'm going to read a quote from Heinrich Zimmer, his wonderful work, Philosophies of India. It comes from there. I would highly recommend this book. And this quote relates to the esoteric axiom of as above, so below, in that he is seeking to illustrate the activity of Brahman by relating this to the human psyche. So I'm going to read this quote to you now. When we evolve a dream world of dream scenery and dream people, supplying a dream double of our own ego to enjoy all sorts of adventures, we are undiminished and indeed realize an expansion of our personal substance. Unseen forces manifest themselves in all of the images here, and by so doing enjoy themselves, realize themselves. It is likewise with God when he pours forth his Maya force. Such activities in dream or in waking are expansive, self-delighting exercises of man's vital essence, which is ready for and easily capable of the facile self-transformations. Man's work therein is a microcosmic counterpart of the creative principle of the universe. God's Maya shapes the universe by taking shape itself, playing through all the transitory figures and bewildering events, and therein it is not in the least diminished, but on the contrary, only magnified and expanded. Theosophy informs us that in essence we are monads, indivisible sparks of a divine flame referred to as the solar logos. And as part of the evolutionary intent of this great being, the monads are projected down the various planes of matter, undertaking this long evolutionary journey as a means of developing and expressing qualities hitherto latent. The monads are also seeking to acquire what we refer to as spiritual staying power, that is, the ability to radiate and express our spiritual qualities amidst the many constraints of the planes below, the densest and most challenging of these being the physical. Now, where are we? So it is our experiences within the realm of Maya, or Saguna Brahman, that are very important in terms of realizing the intent of this great being which we are a part of, the solar logos, and to whom we return at the conclusion of our long evolutionary journey. In India, the symbolism of the lingam penetrating the yoni represents Brahman, pouring out the energy of life into the womb of creation, which is symbolized by the goddess figures found in various world myth. And when we contemplate the symbolism of the god and goddess in embrace, we are pondering over the generation of life itself and its profound mystery. And the creative union that procreates and sustains the life of our universe, the sacred marriage, or hieros gamos, is derived from the amalgamation of the active and passive powers of this single transcendent principle, which is in essence one, but appears as two. And when we tread the spiritual path, we are seeking to effect this self-same sacred marriage in microcosm. Gone too far ahead, I think. Sorry. Oh, I've missed out a slide, never mind. The medieval alchemists depicted this in terms of the unification of the sun and moon, this occurring within the chalice of the physical body. The alchemists sought to attain the philosopher's stone as symbol of the awakened self, and this then leads to the transformation of the base metal of the transient, corruptible human personality into the shining, radiant, eternal, incorruptible gold of the soul or higher self. And Carl Jung outlined this in his concept of individuation, which is related to a unification of opposites within the human psyche. Jung was particularly emphasize the need to unify the conscious components of the human psyche with the unconscious including what in Theosophy we refer to as the soul or higher self, as the instrument of the monad. Now, Indian teachings use the term Shakti in describing the active power of deity and manifestation, and this is symbolized in myth as the deity's goddess consort. Maya Shakti is personified as the world-protecting, feminine, maternal aspect of Brahman. She represents creative joy, wonder, and the beauty of manifest life, together with its qualities of enticement and seduction, which can deflect us from expressing the intent of our spiritual essence. So the goddess then provides the means by which deity may manifest, and the goddess factor is found on all levels of existence beneath the first cause. And it is therefore within the realm of the goddess we undertake this long evolutionary journey, the realm of the goddess, or Saguna Brahman. As monads, we undertake this evolutionary descent and ascent back to the Father's house as a means of acquiring spiritual staying power. And it is the energies of the goddess, or perhaps more poetically I could state the spell of the goddess, that produces the powers of Maya, whereby the one divine life, eminent within all forms, appears to us as many separate and distinct lives, and the affairs of this transient phenomenal world appear as real and enduring. And this transient world is able to seduce us to the extent that we identify with it exclusively at the expense of our inner or real nature. In India, one of the main aspects of the goddess is that of Kali, Shiva's consort. She is the black mother void from whom all things proceed and to whom all things return. I have an image here of the renowned anthropologist Joseph Campbell, the great student of myth, and one of the world's foremost authorities on mythological symbolism. And he states that the goddess figure in myth symbolizes all that can be known, and the secrets of the goddess are those of life itself, and they're only available to those who can transcend her powers of Maya. So it is within the realm of the goddess then that we undertake this great journey and are presented with all these challenges as a means of acquiring spiritual staying power, developing hitherto latent spiritual qualities. And when we do this, when we tread the spiritual path, we eventually become eligible to access the secrets of the goddess rather than being entangled by the Maya and the luster of the lower worlds of impermanence. And when we tread the path, we should be aware that the goddess guards these secrets most jealously. She will only reveal them to those who demonstrate their worthiness. And we must therefore be able to withstand the many tests and trials which we shall be subjected to as we tread the spiritual path, as the higher self seeks to test our worthiness as a spiritual instrument of expression, while seeking to dispense with karma at a more rapid rate. And we must most certainly possess the necessary psychological integration to cope with and to utilize the forces of the unconscious that shall inevitably confront us here. The dangers here are illustrated in the myth of Actaeon, the callow youth who was hunting in the forest and came across the goddess Artemis and her nymphs bathing naked in a pool. Artemis, who's very chaste and pure goddess, was furious at this, and she transformed Actaeon into a stag. He was then chased and devoured by his very own hounds. So in this myth, Actaeon symbolizes the individual who dabbles in esoteric pursuits without being sufficiently aware of the processes and the mechanisms involved, and lacking the necessary psychological integration to cope with the forces of the unconscious which are awakened here. Artemis has dominion over the forest, which is a symbol for the unconscious. She is chaste and pure, indicating this as a requirement when one treads a spiritual path, if they are to utilize the energies of the inner realms. Actium then, not being at that state of development, is torn apart by his own hound, symbolizing the forces of the lower unconscious. So in terms of Maya, there are two very famous illustrations which I'm going to go over quickly. The first one is by Shankara, the great 6th century exponent of Advaita Vedanta. When walking along a road, a dark road, the sight of a coiled rope is mistaken for a snake. Upon closer inspection, the truth is revealed and the illusion is shattered. When the rope is known, the snake vanishes. And similarly, when we realize that creation is infused by the one divine life, which the Hindu teachings refer to as Brahman, then the world of multiplicity and illusion vanishes. Michael gave an excellent talk yesterday about the treading of the spiritual path and various disciplines that we must undertake as a means of overcoming this Maya, whereby we connect with the higher self and ultimately the monad. But this realization, it sounds very simple for me to stand up here and talk about it and present this talk in an intellectual manner, but it is very, very challenging for us to be infused by the energies of the higher self so that we are constantly aware of the essence of our being and our purpose within this realm of Maya. And that is the meaning of Maya here. It's not that what we see doesn't exist. It's rather that we are blinded, or at least certainly I am, by our own imperfections, which prevent us from apprehending the real or inner nature of that which we perceive. The imperfect mind does not perceive perfect truth. Rather, it struggles under an illusion due to its own imperfections, a Maya. The second famous analogy is that of Plato's cave, where in the Republic, Plato asks his students to visualize a group of individuals shackled to a cave wall, and all they can do is stare at the wall of the cave in front of them. Behind them there is a lit fire, which enables the people there to go about their daily business. And of course what Plato is doing here is contrasting the causal realms of the higher self to the physical world, stating that all we are doing here is observing a shadow show, what HPB referred to as a magic lantern show. And he asks his students, what if one of these individuals could break free of their shackles, which of course we are seeking to do by undertaking the disciplines of the spiritual path. We then see what is giving rise to the shadows on the wall. In Jungian terms, we become aware of the archetypes and can consciously express their energies. And taking it further, what if one can climb upwards out of the cave and confront the sunlight of their essence, the monad? Obviously, the light would be blinding initially, but once one's eyes had adjusted, they would have a very different understanding of the processes of life. And then, of course, if they come back down, take their place amongst the prisoners and try to explain to them that these shadows on the wall are not really what's happening, but there are subjective or higher factors which give rise to the shadows, well, they're going to have great difficulty. And that has been the challenge, of course, throughout history for all the great initiates, to try to impart spiritual truths to people who are entrapped in the realms of Maya. Where are we? So through the lower mind and our thought processes, we function effectively in the outer world. However, from a spiritual perspective, the lower mind represents a limitation. As HPB famously states in The Voice of the Silence, the mind is the slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. The lower mind stands between us and the higher self, and its constant chatter, which Michael referred to yesterday, deafens us to the inner voice. And the lower mind is anchored to the physical world of duality, and it understands the objects and the circumstances of that world by means of comparison. And it is continually caught between the opposites, which it largely creates of its own accord here. And the spiritual aspirant ultimately seeks to obtain a transcendent state of being, completely beyond any form of opposites, where all differentiations known to the mind therefore vanish. And spiritual truth is found not on the level of duality, but in the underlying oneness. And in terms of mythological symbolism, we are challenged, like the classical hero Jason, to sail beyond the Symplegades, the clashing rocks, which represent or symbolize the opposites. So we stand then at the midpoint between two opposite poles. We have the monad and its qualities, which the Vedanta teachings refer to as Sat, Chit and Ananda, or ultimate being, pure consciousness and bliss. And we have, of course, dense physical matter. And our objectives should be aligned, of course, to those of the monad, seeking to develop and express its qualities amidst the constraints of physical form. And Joseph Campbell came up with a quote, which I particularly like here, that we should render ourselves transparent to transcendence, whereby the immortal aspect of our being can express its intent as part of a vast evolutionary design. And this is what we are seeking to effect when we tread the spiritual path, which the wisdom teachings commonly symbolize as a mountainous ascent. If we are to undertake the path of discipleship, a disciple being one who undertakes serious spiritual disciplines, we are ascending the symbolic cliff face of the mountain. And this is a very arduous and most challenging process. However, the magnificent vistas which open up to us in the form of expansions in our consciousness render this process worthwhile, extremely worthwhile. So we're now going to look at Maya from the psychological perspective in terms of us treading the path. I've given a brief outline of the cosmology here. If we were going to discuss this matter, say in the manner of a metaphysics seminar at university, someone would quickly say, well, everything beneath the first cause is Mayavic, and that is correct. But in terms of our individual psyche and treading the path, we'll consider the worlds of the personality as Mayavic and the worlds of the higher self as real. So in treading the path, there are the time-honoured practices, which will remain a secret to the uninitiated. No, those of us study of the occult classics, meditation, and service to humanity and to the planet in general. And we must learn to integrate and purify the physical, astral, and mental bodies to fashion a personality which can serve as an effective instrument of the higher self. When the personality is integrated, we can focus on whatever objectives we choose. We are not distracted by the affairs of the outer world. And this is very, very important when treading the spiritual path. And through our practices of study, meditation, and service, we construct the Antakarana, or rainbow bridge, which links the personality to the soul or higher self. This is a thread of Ariadne which leads us out of the labyrinthine realms of the lower psyche up to the causal realms of existence. It's illustrated here on Yggdrasil, the Norse tree of life, whereby Bifrost, the rainbow bridge, is linking Midgard, the land which humans inhabit, to Asgard, the realm of the gods. That was the Norse interpretation of the Antakarana. And meditation is a particularly effective way of widening this link between soul and personality. And as Michael mentioned yesterday, meditation leads to samadhi, or what we in the West refer to as the superconscious experience, whereby one's individual consciousness merges with that of the higher self, whose consciousness is part of the greater being, the planetary logos, and perhaps even higher levels of samadhi for the great initiates, consciousness merging with the monad in the intent of the great solar being. And through these experiences, this is when we glimpse a vision of the goddess. We become privy to her secrets. And when we tread the path, it's important to be aware that the higher self will reciprocate. As Douglas Baker used to say, for every step we take towards the soul, it will take two towards us. And this is very, very true. And treading the path, there will be certain signposts which tell us that we are on the right track. When I was in my early 30s, I'd been studying metaphysical teachings for a little while, but I decided, no, it's theosophically related stuff that I'm going to study and hopefully teach. And a few months later, I went down with quite a serious illness, which astrologically could be seen by the opposition between transiting Saturn and the Moon in my chart. And that was effectively a signpost on the path for me. The higher self was taking me more seriously. There was this opportunity, in accord with the nature of the cosmos at the time, the divine physiology, to offload further karma. Of course, I did not find this easy. My initial reaction could probably be likened to Graham Taylor's, if anyone watched England lose to Holland in the World Cup, when he spoke to the referee at the end of the game. Do I not like that? That was my response at the time, but looking back, that was a very valuable experience. So treading the path then, we unfold the symbolic lotus petals of the soul by expressing its qualities of Atma, Buddhi and Manas. Atma relates to divine persistent will, the ability to persist in our spiritual endeavours, regardless of the many challenges which will confront us. We must cling to a narrow precipice on the symbolic mountain, whilst all around us appears to be crumbling. And these experiences educate us in terms of overcoming Maya. They alert us to the absolute and utter futility of identifying with the transient outer world. I've deliberately chosen the symbol of the mountain goat here, the sign of Capricorn, which rules integration, synthesis, and spiritual initiation. Capricorn also rules responsibility, authority, difficulties, burdens, isolation, long delays, and these are all related to the treading of the spiritual path. Similarly, we must develop the quality of Buddhi, the Buddhic plane. The energies here are encapsulated by the phrase love wisely applied and wisdom lovingly applied. The opening of the heart chakra and the expression of all its qualities: unconditional love, compassion, empathy, discrimination, courage, and so on. And we must exercise the quality of higher manas, or abstract thought which does not relate to our survival instincts, nor to the fulfillment of our various desires. And we can develop abstract thought through studying the classical teachings, and particularly through studying and interpreting the symbolism of myth and the imagery which we experience in dreams and meditation. And this serves also to construct this antakarana. Now, in contemporary Western society, Maya takes a form of materialism and various factors which incite and invoke our desire nature. And it is our purpose to overcome and transmute desire when we tread the spiritual path. And for everyone in this room, I feel we have a wonderful opportunity in that our soul has chosen to incarnate into such a culture where we are literally bombarded with glamour and nonsense perpetually, whether it's through a television screen, the internet, a mobile app, whether we're walking down the high street or whatever. And if we can express the qualities of the soul amidst all this, we can pretty much do it anywhere. So it's a wonderful opportunity. And the great key to overcoming Maya, you probably can't see that, is the factor of discrimination, which the Hindus refer to as viveka. Discrimination between the real and the unreal, i.e. the spiritual and enduring, and the non-enduring, the material, the transient. And in a book, Initiation, Annie Besant stated, you must learn to distinguish in everything around you between the permanent element and the impermanent, between the surface and the content, between the eternal and the transitory. It is the force of desire which binds our consciousness to the material world and to the wheel of rebirth, and to what HPB described as a magic lantern show, as I said earlier. And desire arises through our identification with and our attachment to the objects and the circumstances of the outer world. And we cannot express the immortal, enduring aspect of our being if our efforts in life are based upon and driven by the pursuit of matters of an impermanent nature. And this is a very important consideration when we seek to effect spiritual transformation. Of course, when the monad sent its mechanisms, the higher and lower triad, or soul and personality, into contact with matter, desire was necessary in that it enabled spirit to engage with matter. It brought the two into contact with each other. However, when we experience the pull of the monad, or what Joseph Campbell referred to as the call to adventure, we are then challenged towards disengaging our consciousness from the attraction of the lower worlds, to become oblivious to the enticements of Maya. And at this stage of human evolution, desire must be overcome, transmuted. This is an image of Ixion, a character from Greek myth. Zeus took pity upon this guy and invited him to the table of the gods, Mount Olympus. And Ixion repaid the gratitude by becoming amorous and developing a passion for Zeus's wife, Hera. Zeus, the divine principle within, Hera the goddess. Zeus then creates a cloud to resemble Hera, and Ixion couples with the cloud, producing the half-human, half-animal race of the centaurs. There are different versions as to how this came about. But as punishment, Zeus then orders Hermes to bind Ixion to this fiery wheel which rolls perpetually through the underworld. And if we are driven by instincts and desires, we remain going round in circles in the lower world. So we are not eligible to sit at the table of the gods. We are unaware of the ineffable bliss of the higher realms of consciousness. And this is important to bear in mind when we tread the spiritual path. So what the wisdom teachings refer to as the soul or higher self is commonly symbolized as a lotus. The lotus has its roots in the ground, which symbolizes our physical body, our base. Its stem extends up through the water, symbolic of the emotions, the astral plane, our desire nature. And importantly, it flowers above the water in the air at the level of mind. It opens through its exposure to the rays of the sun, which symbolizes our spiritual essence, the monad. The fact that the lotus flowers above the water emphasizes that we must function at a level beyond that of the emotions, avoiding what the Hindus refer to as karma manas, or mind driven or contaminated by desire. And towards these ends, we must relinquish various desires which we possess, such as the desire for attaining status and recognition in the world. As Madame Blavatsky states in The Voice of the Silence, kill out ambition, but live like one ambitious. I.e., ambitious in terms of building the antakarana, connecting with the higher self, and ultimately expressing the intent of the monad. We must rid ourselves of the need for emotional security, whether this is obtained through wealth or through relationships or whatever. We must not be overwhelmed by sensual pleasures at the expense of the development of our subjective nature. And we must extricate ourselves from the demands of society in the outer world and any perceived duties here. The classical teachings inform us of the futility of such pursuits if we are to succeed in the process of spiritual transformation. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna provides Arjuna with 3 injunctions: to act without regard for the fruits of one's action, to avoid identification with action, and to dedicate action to Brahman, the transcendent reality, the eternal aspect of our being, or in simple terms, to function as a soul within the lower realms. And as I've stated, when we tread the path, we will be challenged. And we must cultivate the quality often referred to as divine indifference in terms of the fluctuating circumstances of the outer world and to the clamouring of the mental and astral bodies as they are subjected to spiritual disciplines. Ephemeral considerations must be put aside. The development of our consciousness is considerably more important than our circumstances. Here we have the Hindu symbol of the swan, floating calmly and serenely on the waters of life. This is symbolic of the self-realized individual who is unaffected by the eddies and currents of mundane existence. And it can also be held to symbolize one who can ride upon the waters of the unconscious, bathing in the spiritual fire which these reflect. We're going to look at some mythological symbolism here. Those who know me may mutter surprise, surprise, as I do like mythology and relating it to the wisdom teachings. But we're going to look at the factor of spiritual transformation in myth, which is often symbolized as a sea journey. This is a recurring theme in myth. And the sea journey is illustrative of one being subjected to the energies of what Jung described as the collective unconscious. It is here where reside the archetypes or divine ideas of the greater beings which we are a part of, the planetary and solar logos. It is here where reside the morphic fields or energy reservoirs described by Sheldrake, which have accumulated through the history of humanity in terms of our response to these divine ideas. We also find here, of course, our own unconscious and the lower realms of this. We seek to access the realms of what the transpersonal psychologist Asajovi described as the superconscious, Atma, Buddhi and Manas. But we must also deal with the lower unconscious, including here what the wisdom teachings refer to as the dweller on the threshold, the accumulated personality characteristics from our many previous lives, including here our fears and repressed and undesirable characteristics. In Egyptian myth, we have Osiris being tricked by his evil brother Set and placed into a chest and cast into the Nile. This is illustrative of the sea journey. In the Greek hero myth of Perseus, Perseus as a baby and his mother Danae are cast into a chest by her father Acrisius, the corrupt king. He does this for fear that one day Perseus will kill him, as foretold by a prophecy. Now, Acrisius is symbolic of an ego structure which does not want to yield, the crystallized ego structure. And we must be aware that this can happen within us. We must be adaptable and malleable when we tread the spiritual path. The corrupt king in myth generally symbolizes spirit which has lost its way in matter. That's a simple way to look at it. The alchemist described the same process by the king taking a bath. The king symbolic of the ego, bathing within the waters of the unconscious as a means of undergoing this spiritual transformation, which will ultimately enable one to overcome, to penetrate the veil of Maya. The completion of this sea journey symbolises a rebirth where one undergoes a transformation. The hero then may proceed further on the evolutionary journey, ultimately returning to the source of one's being. Of course, there are other symbols for the unconscious. This very quickly. In the Grail legends, we have the forest adventurers, which the knights enter in pursuit of the Grail, a divine receptacle symbolic of the higher self, which can receive the energies of the monad, or at least after the third initiation. We have the underworld in Greek myth, the domain of Hades. The Romans called him Pluto, this name illustrating the spiritual riches found within. And in the books by C.S. Lewis, we have the magical kingdom of Narnia, where the Pevensey children are transported into as a means of fulfilling a particular quest. Now, Indian traditions use the symbol of water also. They symbolise the spiritual path by the crossing of a river from one shore to the other. And they state that this river of ignorance and passion is broad and dangerous to cross, but the divine ferryman can bring his devotees across to the other shore of enlightenment. The Jain saviors are called Tirthankaras, meaning crossing makers, whilst the Buddhas talk of yanas, or ferry boats, which represent methods or vehicles which we may utilise in journeying to the source of our being. And that is essentially what our teachings are, and all the great esoteric teachings. We have so many books here. They're all essentially ferry boats which can lead us from the shore of illusion and Maya to that of enlightenment. There's an allegorical tale found in one of the Buddhist sutras where the Mahayana saviour Avalokiteshvara is represented as a winged steed named Cloud. Now, in this tale, a company of merchants set sail for the Isle of Jewels, but they are shipwrecked on another island. They are received by beautiful and alluring women who offer them hospitality and invite them to make love. But the women turn out to be devouring, man-eating monsters. The women, of course, symbolising here the Maya of the lower world. So perhaps I should have done this one the other way round, with the men on the island. So Cloud then appears to the merchants and calls out Koparaga, the Indian term for who is for the other shore. And the merchants hear the cry, and those who are able to climb aboard the Cloud, and he safely transports them to the Jewel Isle. However, those who climb onto Cloud even, and have one look back, fall to their death in the sea below. And this symbolises when we tread the path, there is no metaphorically looking back to our old way of life, but we must proceed on our evolutionary journey, seeking to penetrate the mists of Maya. There's no going back. There have been times in my life where I have sought refuge in the laybys of existence, or in my early 40s, various things hadn't worked out for me, particularly in spiritual groups, and I thought I would read the esoteric material now and again, but on the whole, leave it alone. But just one catastrophe after another occurred in my life, and I'm back here at this game, still doing it. So the tale I've just given you, there are parallels here in the Odyssey, where Odysseus is journeying home to his father, and he is shipwrecked on an island, and the nymph Calypso seduces him and lies to him, promising him immortality if he weds her. Now Zeus, the monad, divine principle, he is alerted by Athene, a goddess figure, as to the plight of Odysseus. And Hermes is sent to rescue Odysseus and to give him guidance and direction as to how to proceed on his way. Hermes is the psychopomp, the guide of souls, the aspect of the higher self which assists us on our evolutionary journey, which will offer information to us in symbolic form through dreams, meditations, and synchronicities, where there is a concurrence with our subjective mind and the affairs of the outer world. And we should be very alert to the psychopomp when we tread the path, when we seek to penetrate the veil of Maya. Michael spoke of the caduceus, that is a magic wand which Hermes holds, which symbolizes the unification of opposites and enables him to transcend boundaries. And similarly, through this unification of opposites, through us being alive to the promptings of the psychopomp, we can ultimately penetrate the veil of matter. So we've considered a subject which is very abstruse. I got a bit lost trying to write this. I'm normally very concise, when I write a talk, but the nature of this one, I found it difficult. I keep repeating myself, and of course, Maya is in essence illusory. In esoteric astrology, it's associated with Neptune and Cancer, and Neptune is afflicted in my particular chart. But I've done my best here to try and give an indication of Maya and its implications for the individual treading the spiritual path. I'm going to conclude by reading a short tale employed as a parable by the Hindu sage Ramakrishna. This is the story of Narada. Now, Narada sought to ascertain the meaning of Maya, so he went to Vishnu and asked him. And in response, Vishnu said to Narada he could accompany him on a trip into the desert. And after walking several miles, Krishna said, "Narada, I'm very thirsty. Would you fetch me some water?" "I shall go off at once, Lord," said Narada. And he raced ahead in search of water. He reached a village and he knocked on the door of the first house that he came to, and a beautiful young girl opened the door. Narada was overwhelmed by the beauty of this lady. It was love at first sight. He immediately forgot his mission for water and began to talk with the young maid. He lingered in the village all day, and the following day he returned to the house chatting to the girl, and their talk blossomed into love. Narada then asked the girl's father for her hand in marriage. The father agreed, and the pair were married. They lived in the village and had children. A few years passed happily for Narada, his wife and family. His father-in-law then died, and Narada inherited his lands. Narada was living a very happy life with his wife and children enjoying the pleasures of a peasant life. Then one year the monsoons were unusually heavy, and the rains caused the river to flood and swell. Its banks were burst, and the rushing water flooded the entire village. People and animals were swept away and drowned. Narada was determined to escape the fury of the swirling waters, and with one hand he held his wife, with the other one of his children. The third child he placed on his shoulder. He entered the water seeking to escape. However, the current was too strong. The child sitting on his shoulders was swept away. In trying to save this child, he lost grasp of the other one, and then his wife. Narada was then thrown onto a piece of land. He was weeping and wailing in bitter lament. And suddenly he heard a gentle voice. "Narada, where is the water? I asked you to fetch a pitcher of water for me, and you've been gone for almost half an hour." "Half an hour?" exclaimed Narada. 12 years of his life had passed, and this had all taken place in half an hour. And Vishnu then said to Narada, "Knowledge of Maya is not experience of Maya. Unless one experiences Maya, one will not be able to empathize with those who are trapped in it." Vishnu then said, "Now that you have experienced Maya, I want you to go and meet people, shake up their measuring scales, challenge their subjective realities until they realize that the only way out of Maya is seeking answers out of material reality. I want you to provoke them into following the spiritual path." So that concludes my presentation. Thank you. And